It's a terrible story. The death of Baby Kganya has thrust child safety back into the spotlight at ECDs, or early childhood development centres. The little 3-year-old died last week after a loose bookshelf collapsed on him. Terribly, it caused fatal injuries. The centres, of course, crucial part of raising a child, but of course the question has to be asked, how safe are they? Is this a once-off issue, never to be repeated, or are there bigger problems? Well, I'm joined by the director of the Centre for Early Childhood Development. It is Professor Eric Atmore this afternoon, or good evening to you rather, Prof, and appreciate your time. And obviously this is a terrible tragedy, but does this require us to cast a spotlight on ECD in general, or was this just a terrible tragedy in one particular place? Good evening.
Gareth, good evening. And before I answer that, please may we send our condolences to the family, not only of the 3-year-old boy at Little Ashford, but a 4-year-old drowned in a pit latrine in the Eastern Cape during the same week. And these are both devastating, they are tragic, and they should not happen. You know, the regulations as part of the Children's Act are pretty clear. Health and safety are critical and is the responsibility of the governing body, the principal, and the teaching staff. So 2 deaths in a week is 2 deaths too many, and it is shocking and devastating for the early childhood sector.
And I don't think anybody would disagree with you, Prof. So let's just focus, if we could, not to discount what happened with the pit toilet incident. We can maybe, if we have time, talk about that, of course. But this issue with the school bookshelf falling on little Baby Kganya, what do we know about the incident? Is this just negligence on behalf of that particular ECD, or is it a bigger issue within the industry, or do we need to focus only on this particular ECD?
No, Gareth, it's not only this ECD. You know, across the country we have 42,420 early childhood development centres of varying quality. Now, accidents can happen at the best, and they can also happen at the most poorly resourced. The inquiry will give us evidence of what happened. But each day and regularly throughout the day, the principal and the staff have a responsibility to walk around the facility and look at what is loose and unsafe. Are there puddles of water around, or a bucket of water? Is there medicine that hasn't been locked away in a safety deposit box? Are there household detergents? Is the environment safe for young children? No broken edges or steel lying around. So, you know, poverty is widespread in South Africa, and most of these early childhood development centres would love to have a top-of-the-range early childhood development centre. The fact is, poverty and lack of resources prevents that. On the other side of the coin, the department responsible, which for years was social development and is now education, they do not do sufficient visits, and they do not do sufficient thorough visits to assess the safety levels at these early childhood centres. So it's a widespread systemic problem in all 9 provinces, and it's something we have to act on urgently.
And not for a second, Prof, am I defending either of those departments about a lack of doing their jobs. When you mention that number of over 44,000 ECDs, it does sound like a massive logistical issue. Is there a suggestion you have, or a solution you could present to say, look, to the government, you can't get to everybody, there's just too many? Is there a middleman? Is there a middle way of handling a situation like this? Maybe a ECD ombudsman, for lack of a much more creative way of explaining my question.
Let me tell you what's happening in the Western Cape province. The department in the Western Cape has contracted 17 non-profit training organizations to do the compliance requirements and to check that the centers are safe and secure for all children. These non-profits get paid a fee for doing this, and In the Western Cape, we have several thousand early childhood centers that have all been allocated, and the non-profits are able to make far more regular visits and checks on these centers. The Western Cape is the only province that has taken that strategy, and we would suggest that that be part of the system in all 9 provinces. But we really have to wake up. We cannot have another single child being injured and worst case scenario killed at an ECD center. It's just intolerable, and it's not necessary.
It's certainly not, Prof. And I'm going to say goodbye to you in a moment, and I appreciate you coming on this afternoon. Just as I say goodbye to you, I imagine everything you've raised now could alert parents to maybe how they haven't checked the ECD that their little youngster is going to. You mentioned earlier you can walk around as a parent, keep your eyes open, puddles of water, medicine, etc. But in the absence of parents walking around and knowing what to look for, what should a parent do if they're now questioning the safety standards of an ECD? Is there a certificate of compliance, for example? Is there something they can ask the manager for? Not every parent can walk around and make sure bookshelves are tied back.
Every center that takes in 7 or more children in South Africa is required to register under the Children's Act. The reality is that more than 60% of our early childhood development centers are unregistered, meaning that they are not compliant. And again, there's a host of reasons for this. I think part of the problem is that government has not come to the party. And whilst we have a wonderful early childhood development policy, it's not being implemented at all. So for parents have every right to walk around and to check and ask questions, ask for the registration certificate. And if parents see anything which is out of order, so to speak, they have not only the duty but the obligation to inform the management body or the governing body of the ECD center. Nothing is more important than this health and safety of our children in these ECD centers.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree, and that's why I wanted to get that question in. So now parents who have children or loved ones at that age who are going to ECDs, now you know what to do. Prof, thank you very, very much. It's terrible you and I only talk when there's a tragedy like this, but I appreciate your time. Professor Eric Atmore joining us this afternoon.